Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. The BBC's history with television idents is one that goes back a long way, and still stands as one of the most groundbreaking, innovative, and interesting across the entire television landscape. Having used the globe as its central motif and identifier for several decades, viewers were stunned when early into the new millennium, the then most recent package of BBC One idents featured people doing an assortment of activities. Whilst the rhythm and movement set is looked on with more fondness today, by the time they were phased out in 2006, it was clear that BBC One needed to win back some favour with viewers in terms of its presentation. On the 7th of October, 2006, that moment of truth would arrive. Just before we begin, a little heads up. A small selection of the sequences you'll see today I've had to trim down or mainly represent in the form of still photographs. I've unfortunately had to do this in order to make sure I don't receive any copyright notices. However, as I said, it's only on a small selection, so on the whole you'll be getting the raw video footage. So sit back, relax, and join me as we delve into the decade-long stint of the CIRLCES idents. And we'll kick things off with probably the most recognisable of the set, hippos. Hard to believe this is over 15 years old. This simple yet engaging footage of hippos swimming about in water is instantly recognisable for several generations of viewers. This one sets the tone for how BBC One would approach idents for the next decade. A simple yet easily identifiable concept, all culminating around a central circle being formed, often in motion. Within that central circle is the BBC One logo, newly stylised in all lowercase, the first time in the channel's history that this had occurred. The hippo sequence works in many respects. The setting, in the depths of the sea, is presented in a calming and soothing manner. Seeing all these hippos, albeit many computer-generated, swimming about sets a peaceful tone, strengthened by the soft sounds of the water and the ambient soundtrack. You'll notice a central motif in terms of the music, and be prepared to hear this crop up in many of the different idents you'll see today. Overall, the hippos mark the perfect representation of the CIRLCES set, if you ask me. It sets up that relaxing, yet engaging atmosphere that one would hope for before settling down to their favourite programmes. A strong start, but let's see if that momentum can continue as we hop on our bikes. See, the circles can be thrilling too. In a complete contrast to the serene calmness of hippos, Bike sees us view three motorcyclists as they ride around what is supposedly referred to as the Wall of Death. How cheery. As they zip around getting faster and faster, we swap to a top-down view, ultimately seeing the BBC One logo, the motorist forming the central circle motif. I like the variety of speeds that we're treated to here, from seeing them move around normally before the footage is sped up immeasurably. We also get some major flashes of the colour red, which of course is the primary colour associated with BBC One, a feature that in some part continues to this day. The soundtrack also carries the new recurring motif, but despite the consistency, I find this to be one of the weaker sequences of the original launch batch. It's not a bad ident, but beyond watching these guys circle a track, there isn't much else to keep me engaged. But keep in mind, we've got a ton of idents left to get through today, so I think we'll hit the pitch and play some football. Oh boy, that soundtrack does take me back. Deviating slightly from the norm, this funky, more produced sound became such an earworm for me during this era. Now I'm not sporty at all, and football I rarely tune into, but seeing these players do their thing whilst accompanied with this music and this editing style was pretty boss. After some showcase of skills, we see the players in a circle, shooting footballs into the middle and ultimately across to each other. I like the final image. You have the players forming a circle, aligning with this set's central concept, but the inner ring of footballs that is created is a nice extra touch, and as all of them are red, it also makes it feel truly part of the BBC One branding. My only criticism would be that until that point, the colours seem a little drab overall. I fully understand that this could have been done to punctuate the red that we do see, but to me, football is such a lively and colourful game, so indulging in the vibrancy of it wouldn't have been a bad option. Nevertheless, the soundtrack alone makes this a winner for me, but the sequence does hold a nice progression. But now we take to the skies as we fly our kites. Kite flying seems pretty intense. I never got into the hobby myself, but I know those who do are very passionate about it. I think this ident tries to get across that thrill that can come from flying a kite, or maybe the stress when you're up against windy conditions such as this. The original soundtrack that was used for the first few years of its broadcast, I'd argue contributes to this theory. It creates a sense of excitement, of wonder, of pure enjoyment, and despite the harsh conditions, the people we see here seem to be enjoying themselves. The final image isn't the most engaging or eye-catching, but it does the job just fine. The kites vaguely form a circular pattern, and their red tones once again align with BBC One as a channel. Like football though, I can't help but feel that most of the colours besides the red of the kites have been seriously washed out. This was the late 2000s however, and drab dull colour palettes was somewhat of a trend in media for some reason at this time. But it's time to get out of the wind and head over to the petals. An alternative name for this ident is Ring o' Roses, based on the song and dance often performed by children, and had some rather dark origins, would you believe, but that's a story for another day. This one just represents joy, the infinite amount of fun that can be had as a child with seemingly even the most mundane things. We see this group of kids picking through flowers before playing Ring o' Roses, forming the central circle motif of the ident set. The final image is particularly striking due to the blends of colour. We of course know that the red from the rose petals is going to be predominant, but it's nice that the other colours such as greens and yellows have been thrown into the mix as well. However, the whole sequence seems to have some sort of filter layered on top of it, giving everything a sort of yellowish tint. I'm not saying it ruins the ident we get, but I do question as to whether it's necessary. But as the sun sets, it's time that we looked up to the moon. Now, this is truly beautiful. We see a group of people in fishing boats come together at the dead of night. They each carry a piece of bright white material, the only major source of light that we see. Piece by piece, they align them together, ultimately forming the moon, which hovers brightly above the water, and creating a gorgeous final image for the BBC One logo to slot into. The sight of the moon some would find serene enough, but seeing it glow brightly as it effortlessly hovers above a body of water can be quite honestly breathtaking. The music in this ident as well is just fantastic. It perfectly complements the visuals that we see on screen, and honestly, I wouldn't hesitate to say that this is truly one of the best sequences out of the entire Circle set. It's a shame then that this was one of the few regular idents to be taken out of constant circulation as early as 2008. But at least it's been preserved over the years, so we can look at how such a simple yet imaginative concept of putting the moon together can result in such an impressive and memorable result. We'll stick with the water for now, as we check out the surfers. Honestly, not too much to say on this one. It's shot really well. I like the contrasting angles we get both above and below the water of the surfers in action, and the surfers themselves are quite stunning to watch as they navigate the waves, but beyond this, there isn't too much that's gripping me. I like the surfer style soundtrack, really does give off that feeling of catching some waves on a sunny day, but for me, personally, I would have maybe liked a bit more of a build-up. Why not show a busy beach and some people excitedly heading out to the sea to surf? I wouldn't say this one is a dud, necessarily, but it just isn't one that I revisit often, or that springs to memory frequently. Let's see if that changes with our next ident today, windows. An interesting idea, not sure if it works though. Amongst a block of flats, we start to see bright streams of light reflect off various windows, with different kinds of people taking note and looking outside. For me, the best part about this sequence is the final image, with the shimmering lights forming the circle against the flats themselves. Why I prefer this final point is that even though the lights are very bright, they're at a distance enough where they don't overwhelm the viewer. Now, I don't have the best eyesight in the world, but when we see the individuals be exposed to the reflections, the light feels a little bit overpowering. Not to mention that colour-wise, yet again, we are presented with a rather washed out palette. These sorts of colour choices can absolutely work in idents given the right scenario and circumstances, but so far, out of the circles we've seen, I'd argue it hinders the overall product rather than helping it. Well, we're going to move on now, from the urban jungle to a magic forest. What a truly magical ident this is. Similar to the moon sequence, this is every element working together effortlessly to create something wonderful. In a forest, we see all kinds of creatures moving about, both big and small, and even some magical fairies are flying about. As the camera shows us these different setups, we eventually come to our final point, a window into the forest in the shape of a circle, naturally, where we can see all of these animals and fairies alike going about the world. It's a lovely blend of nature and fantasy. We have creatures that we recognise and ones of the imagination, and there are a few factors that seal the deal. The first is the use of colour. The lush greens of the forest are shown off in the most beautiful fashion, and the music that accompanies the visuals is once again spot on. It inspires exploration, intrigue, wonder, and a sense of nature working and being as it should. At a time when climate change is a very real danger for us in the future, to see a sequence like this that aims to show off nature thriving alongside some magical elements to go with it makes it ever more appealing and ever more memorable. Definitely up there with Moon as one of the best idents in the entire Circle set. But we're going to leave Earth now and put our trust in the hands of Mission Control. Ah yes, a Saturday night classic. Launched in the summer of 2007, we see a pod leaving Earth into the vastness of space, before crashing down onto the surface of the moon. A rover emerges, curiously looking around taking pictures, before forming a circle, not only in keeping with the central theme of the set, but it almost looks as if the rover is trying to form some sort of signal for another craft to arrive, as we see it perfectly pass over and across the outlined area. The way in which this setting has been captured looks stunning too. Many assume moon-like landscapes are easy to recreate, but when done with so much effort and detail, the results speak for themselves. I also like the somewhat sentient personality that this rover has. Something about the way in which it moves, combined with a playful soundscape, gives the impression that this little guy has a mind all of his own, exploring space in the same way that we humans would, and keep in mind this was a whole year before WALL-E hit the cinemas. Overall, this is another belter from the Circles era. I also link it to Saturday nights before the entertainment lineup got underway, and I'm sure a similar sentiment will be shared by tons of viewers. But from the depths of outer space, we're moving to something a little more earthbound, namely, the lawn. There's something eerily creepy about this one. We can see the setting is right in the heart of suburbia, with a bunch of women all mowing their respective lawns. However, you notice from the word go that there is something rather distant about them all. They look like they're lost in some sort of trance, and the music we hear almost has that listful, hypnotic quality about it, one in which you feel you could easily lose yourself in. By the time we zoom out, we see the women have been mowing a bunch of crop circles, which perfectly suit the BBC One logo. The notion of crop circles is a sci-fi cliche that has been around for decades, and the idea that they act as some sort of message or symbol to beings from another world. And given the trance-like state these women seem to be in, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the concept for this ident was directly inspired by that notion. I think a little extra touch, similar to what we see in Mission Control, would have been for some sort of shadow to glide across the screen, further leaning into the notion that the lawn circles the ladies have formed are speaking to some kind of extraterrestrial. I'm glad to have another winner on our hands for the circles, and I think this next one will absolutely be in the hearts of some of you. It's Neon. It doesn't get much better than this, man. Neon, like hippos, is arguably one of the most recognisable idents of the Circle era, and even before I give my thoughts, it's easy to see why. On a dark evening, the streets are illuminated by the bright neon signs, which come to life to enjoy their own night of fun. The star, if you will, is Mary, who with a wink comes to life and leads the charge of all the other neon creatures, strutting their stuff down the streets, heading directly for the Ferris wheel, which they eventually have a go on. The choice of a Ferris wheel to be featured as part of the Circles batch seems like an obvious no-brainer, but I like how the central focus throughout is placed on the various neon characters. The varied mix of bright colours and detail help you easily distinguish who is who, and pausing these sequences in any number of frames is an absolute treat. The funky music we hear too is absolutely perfect for the visuals, giving us that feeling that we're going for a night out and we're going to have a good time, building to a glorious crescendo by the time we've reached the Ferris wheel. My only gripe would be that I wish we had even more time with these animated characters, to see more shots of them, give us more of what these characters are like and what kind of fun they like to embrace. Now, for a few years, Neon was shown exclusively on Saturday nights, which is where I best remember it. However, after receiving a trimmed edit in 2009, it would be seen far more regularly throughout the week. Whilst the shortened version, with different music as well, lasted a lot longer than the original, it is that original that sticks in my head the most. Without a doubt, one of the best the Circles era has to offer, and one of the best BBC idents of the 21st century so far, that's for sure. But after such an elaborate creation such as this, I think we better take to the skies once again, in the helicopter. Hauntingly beautiful. Some would argue it's too downbeat and somber, but I think this fits everything just perfectly. It gives more majesty to the shots of the helicopter flying over the sea, emphasising the water's vast and unpredictable nature, the power it can hold within. By the time we reach the helipad, which acts as the circle for the BBC One logo, you almost forget you're watching a mere ident, and instead opening to some sort of epically shot nature documentary, with capes. Tell you what, this era has a knack for the serene. Debuting in 2008, we see a bunch of cyclists, all wearing different coloured ponchos, cycling around the streets of London. Eventually they form a multicoloured circle, setting up the place for the BBC One logo. Many viewers may remember this one as being the main ident shown on the iPlayer, particularly if you were rewatching a drama from BBC One. But aside from the lovely final image, the build-up to it, at least in the ident's original form, is great too. Seeing the excessive rain, often slowed down as the cyclists zip by, looks fantastic, and what complements it all perfectly is the music. It's soft, not too excessive, and as it broadens out into the familiar BBC One jingle, the rain also subsides, and the bright sun shines on. It's these kind of progressions in idents that seem quite straightforward, but when all the moving parts are working so wonderfully in tandem as they are here, it really creates a great impact. So Capes is yet another fine example of showing us something quite ordinary and mundane, presenting it in a fresh new way, one that has helped Capes become one of the more talked about idents from the Circle set. But if cycling isn't your thing, perhaps you're more inclined to watch the dogs. Such wonderful creatures, dogs, aren't they? We see a pack of them undergo some kind of obstacle course, jumping through fiery hoops, jumping over hurdles, forming a pyramid, and even being catapulted off seesaws. On the surface, making an ident revolving around dogs seems like an obvious winner, given the nation's affinity with them. But what I like is, the approach here doesn't feel lazy at all. I like seeing the different and often humorous tasks which these dogs have to undergo. I like the sense that there is a leader acting as some sort of drill sergeant, the music blaring in the background, giving off vibes to some film classics. The Great Escape came to my mind. The final image is nice too, and again, humorous to see the ringleader try and work his way into the ever-evolving circle. I don't have too much more to say on this one, only that it puts a smile on my face every time I see it pop up, and it also makes me want a dog, like really badly. But throwing things back to what we can do, it's time to show off our pedal power.
Mystic Mo makes a prediction for Charlie. EastEnders in half an hour here on BBC One after Bang Goes the Theory.
These hold a certain charm, don't they? Pedals was first seen in the summer of 2009 to coincide with a new programme, Bang Goes the Theory, a series made in collaboration with the Open University. Given that this series was steeped in science, making an ident that shows what human power can achieve does make some sort of sense. We see a group of people all pedalling ferociously, ultimately generating electricity to illuminate a circle of lights. Whilst I do like this sequence for how it ties into the upcoming programme, I feel something a little more interesting or elaborate could have been generated. Don't get me wrong, showing how we can make electricity just by pedalling is great, but why not devise a series of these, or at least extend this base sequence, perhaps panning across a variety of different experiments going on, all of which can again tie in to Bang Goes the Theory. Pedals is seldom talked about these days, and whilst its foundations are solid, I still think it needed a bit more to delve into, to truly make it a unique and standout programme-specific ident. But we're hopping off our bikes to head down to the stadium.
From Ellis Park, Johannesburg, Diego Maradona's Argentina face Nigeria now on BBC One and the BBC HD channel for our World Cup Match of the Day live.
Definitely captures the vibe of a stadium. Now, I'm no major lover of football, as stated earlier, but the few times I've been in environments like these, when that positive energy and everyone is watching together, it truly can be quite the feeling. Here we see some spectators really enjoying a game before waving a series of materials, the centre of which being the lovely red for which BBC One has become associated with. I like the subtle homage to the Cape's ident too, represented by the numerous rings of multicoloured circles that surround it. This ident itself was first introduced in 2010 to coincide with that year's World Cup, and it was used after that for various sporting events of different levels for several years. I understand its relevance to that genre and why many may like it, but to be honest, this doesn't really do it for me. I'd much rather take the footballers that we saw earlier. I mean, that felt much more engaging than what we're presented with here. But now we're going to move on to the last of the Circles idents that received somewhat regular airplay on BBC One, and quite fittingly, its television centre.
Well, Strictly may be coming from Blackpool tonight, but we don't want BBC Television Centre to miss out. If you were one of the lucky few invited to twirl around our donut and haven't spotted yourself yet, don't panic. Your moves could be on the longer version. Check it out at the Strictly website.
Always good to see the old donut. Television Centre is such an icon when it comes to TV in the UK. Ever since it first opened its doors in the 1960s, it became the centre point for several high-profile programmes and productions for several decades. In 2010, this ident was commissioned primarily to introduce one of the Beeb's most popular programmes, Strictly Come Dancing. We see tons of people arrive at TV Centre, all to begin dancing round the main courtyard, the final shot being this beautiful top-down view, showing the dancers as well as the iconic central fountain. I think this is a lovely tribute to the centre as a whole, made even more poignant given the fact that just a few years after this ident was introduced, TV Centre, as it was, began to close down. It would have been ace to see a brand new sequence perhaps going through some of the many memories that have been made at the place, but even with what we get, these revellers dancing in the courtyard is charming enough to do the job. So not the best, not by a long shot, but even in a small way, perhaps unintentionally, it's a nice and fitting tribute piece to the original Television Centre. So now we've covered the main batch of idents that were in some sort of regular rotation on BBC One at various points between 2006 and 2016. However, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there was a ton of specially made idents amongst the circle set that were only seen in certain regions, specific days, or some of them even being a one-time only broadcast. We'll be looking at the ones that are completely original. Sequences that just slightly modify existing circles idents won't be counted this time. I've tried to account for all of them here, but if I've missed one or two, that's just the way it is sometimes. With that said, let's get into the first of these special sequences, that being daffodils.
Following the Oscars, we've a round on films on Pointless in 45 minutes. First on BBC One Wales, how about another summer holiday? We can dream.
As a half Welshie myself, how can I not enjoy this? St David's Day is celebrated on the 1st of March every year, and exclusively for viewers in BBC One Wales, they would be treated to this sequence for the majority of the Circle ident's life. Daffodils are a beautiful flower to begin with, but to see a bunch of them like this arranged amongst a vibrant, calming water-based background truly feels like a comfort to watch. The gorgeous yellow of the daffodils contrasts beautifully with the background, and whilst the overall image is a stunner, I do wish some sort of effect could have been used to show the daffodils grow or bloom. I think that emergence, that blossoming of life would have been a great way to showcase St David's Day. But as is, this is a lovely homage nonetheless. In 2012, to mark the Story of Wales programme that aired on St David's Day, this special ident was shown, merely showing people walking into a sunset. It looks nice enough, I mean, who doesn't love a peaceful looking sunset? But beyond that, I felt like I didn't really have too much to say on it, but thought it was worth mentioning nonetheless. And to continue with our theme of Welsh exclusive idents on BBC One Wales, we're going to head back to the pitch.
Time to go the extra mile now on BBC One Wales with the climax of the Sport Relief weekend. We join John Inverdale and Jake Humphrey for the 2008 Sport Relief Mile Show.
Certainly one way to celebrate a win. Wales were victorious in the 2008 Six Nations tournament, and not only is it a massive cause for celebration for Wales fans everywhere, but it has precedent, for BBC One at least, to bust out special sequences. Back in 2005, during the Rhythm and Movement era, two special idents themed around Wales were shown for similar reasons. The way this ident is played out is relatively simple, a montage of clips from the event played on an old CRT, with the music from bikes playing in the background. It's a shame that a new piece of original music couldn't have been commissioned for this, but for a last-minute sequence with the sole purpose of celebrating a Welsh victory, it works, like in this sequence from a few years later.
In 45 minutes, we'll be in it to win it with the National Lottery here on BBC One Wales and on HD. That's after we round up a few more pointless celebrities.
I'm telling you, the Welsh love to celebrate. This one again is quite simple, focusing on the stadium to begin with before the ball is kicked into the sky, bursting into a flurry of fireworks. Once more, the logo has been changed to read BBC One Wales, and I like how that small alteration has become a tradition for these occasions. Wales won the Six Nations in both 2012 and 2013, and this ident could be from either of those years. Whilst I don't have much more to say on it, I do think it's nice that a nation and its leading broadcaster can feel they can go against the norm and take the time to indulge and celebrate, because who doesn't love a good bout of celebrations at the end of the day? The Triple Crown ident, on the other hand, I have less to say about that one. Whilst it again is a celebratory ident for Wales, with the one captioning being seen once more, aside from the image of the crowns, that's pretty much it. It's a nice image, for sure, but if you really want to celebrate, I think I appreciate the idents that go a little bit further with that aspect in mind. We're going to jump all the way to the final year of the Circle's life now, in 2016, as this year, again, was a special one for Wales sporting-wise, and I'll explain why after Wales celebrates.
So, Portugal-Wales on Radio Wales and Radio Cymru now. The One Show moves to BBC Two Wales now, making way for Andy Murray, live here on BBC One Wales in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon.
An interesting idea here. In 2016, Wales progressed quite far in the UEFA European Championships, further than I think anyone had expected. This footage is following from Wales' 3-1 victory against Belgium, showing the whole team gathering to celebrate. Whilst essentially using existing footage may seem lazy, I have to admit, I'm surprised at how the music from the regular football ident blends into this. It may have been nice to start with this and perhaps show some highlights from said game, but this one just feels more charming than anything. Always nice to see a nation celebrate, as I've said, but I'd hope for a bit more going into the future. But we'll jump from Wales, further up north to Scotland, to look at an ident celebrating one of their most famous sons, Robert Burns.
Ireland meets a boy band who mix pop with hymns on Songs of Praise. That's at 5 to 5. But first on BBC One Scotland, a whole week of drama for you from Albert Square.
Quite cute, and clever if you know your poetry. We see two mice chasing around after each other in a busy study, papers adorning the room. Commissioned in 2009 to commemorate the 250th anniversary of Robert Burns' birth, keen admirers of the poet will notice one of his works, To a Mouse, as one of the manuscripts that adorn the room. Fitting, of course, as our central focus is on the two mice, who as they circle the room ultimately see the reveal of the BBC One Scotland logo. It's a charming sequence for sure, and the music further adds to a sense of playfulness and fun, but I'm surprised this one was only really used in this one year, given that Burns Night is celebrated in Scotland every year. I would have liked it to give us a bit more about Burns himself, and perhaps more clear examples of his work. Again, it's just nice to see the different regions of the UK get these exclusive sequences for different occasions. Nothing groundbreaking, but nice to see. And now to look at another regional exclusive, we move to Northern Ireland for Wild Week.
Back to school with Waterloo Road in half an hour on BBC One Northern Ireland. But before that, we're halfway through our Wild Week and it's breezy out there tonight in Strangford Lough, so wrap up warm.
Ducks, man. How can you not love ducks? The Wild Week season was seemingly exclusive to BBC One Northern Ireland, so it's pretty neat that the region got its own original ident to mark the occasion. There's nothing much to it really, just a duck shaking its feathers about whilst it sits calmly in the water, the circle for the sequence supposedly being made up of water droplets. It's a bit of a tenuous link to the theme overall, to be honest, and not as cohesive as many other idents we've looked at today. However, to see this close-up of one of my favourite birds, in slow motion and in HD, is certainly a treat for the eye. It's by no means a great ident, but as an eye-catching one, sure, works just fine. I mean, what else do you want me to say? It's a duck just chilling in the water as nature intended. Can't argue with Mother Nature, but ducks aren't the only thing that can often be found in water. Another iconic sight can be tall ships.
Three dads and their daughters all buying homes under the hammer in 45 minutes. First on BBC One Northern Ireland, your call could make the difference.
I've got to be honest, I didn't know this was a thing. Tall ship races occur every year, with the 2015 contest being held in Belfast. To mark said occasion, BBC One Northern Ireland debuted this special sequence, showing the gradual unfurling and reveal of sails before revealing the tall ships in the water. Our central one is splashed in green, a colour commonly associated with Northern Ireland and Ireland as a whole. I must say that design-wise, this has quite a classic feeling to it in terms of visuals. It feels quite simple, but appealing to look at nonetheless. Rather than newly composed music, the soundtrack from the regular Windows ident is reused here, and it does fit quite decently, though I can't help but feel that a new piece, perhaps something reflecting sea shanties or tunes of old, would have been more appropriate for the competition. But Northern Ireland does have a long history with ships, something we'll touch upon a little bit later. But for now, just as Wales had created something original for the 2016 Euros, Northern Ireland had duly followed suit.
Now on BBC One Northern Ireland, it's Euro 2016 Match of the Day with Gary Lineker. England against Russia and Wales against Slovakia. Euro 2016 highlights with Match of the Day at 10:35. Now though, here on BBC One Northern Ireland, will Big Mac be the big man?
A cute concept, but again, just a little lacklustre. The execution of these sequences is by having one locked off camera shot focusing on two different fans, one young, one older. And again, conceptually, I like this idea. Whether you love or hate football, you can't deny that those who class themselves as fans spans generations and probably will continue to do so for years to come. So, at a time of national competition, to show two different demographics of spectator coming to support their team is admirable, to say the least. But with this one shot, and the often slightly unsettling stares, these just come across as a little lazy, at least in my view. Why not show all the different kinds of fans all together, or coming together for one big celebratory chant as the BBC One logo appears? That would at least make a bit more sense with the circles motif than what we get here. But remember how I said that Northern Ireland has a history with ships? Well, let's take a look at some special idents made for the Titanic.
EastEnders kicks off the Tuesday night drama at 7:30. Now though, let's play Pointless.
Quite an epic sense of history here. The Titanic, of course, was a ship that famously sank back in 1912, and around the 100th anniversary of said disaster, BBC One Northern Ireland decided that two original idents should represent a season of programming in March and April of 2012. The first variant sees some workers hammering rivets into presumably the hull of the ship itself, bonding it together to prepare for its maiden voyage, a voyage it would sadly not be able to complete. I like the different angles at which it's been shot, and the final close-up on the scolding rivet marks a nice image for the circle and BBC One logo to appear. However, I much prefer the second variant produced for the season. In this one, we get a short glimpse into the delicate process of creating stained glass, beautiful artwork that carries with it a sense of elegance and status. The Titanic, touted to be the most impressive ship ever crafted at the time, carried such stained glass. Seeing the artist piece it together is quite a relaxing experience, and the final image, with a red circle nicely providing the placeholder for the BBC One logo, looks stunning. Almost makes you wish we could have seen the full finished result of the piece. The sparse yet haunting soundtrack further adds to the impact this ident has too, and I think it creates a rather fitting sequence for the Titanic season as a whole. But moving away from real history, it's time we took a look at an original sequence created for a specific programme, and we'll start with popular drama, Ashes to Ashes.
People's hero turned public enemy now on BBC One and BBC HD, conspiracy and blackmail in the darkness.
This one just feels really cool. Ashes to Ashes was a hit drama set in the 1980s, a pseudo-sequel to Life on Mars, which was set in the 70s. Right off the bat, we see some of the central characters drive about slowly in an Audi Quattro, the year supposedly being 1982. As we get a glimpse of the dingy street, the car eventually speeds off in a rush, the dust that kicked up forming the circle for the sequence, the BBC One logo shown with a neon glare. Very appropriate given it's promoting a programme set in the neon-adorned 80s. The music in this one is superb too. A subtle synth-based arrangement underscores the potential tension as the characters drive slowly past the camera, building to a slightly bolder motif as they speed away before quickly settling back to something a bit calmer. A mastery of music matching the visuals. My only criticism would be that I would want this to be much longer, and to show our characters in some of the different settings that we'd see in the programme itself. But to be fair, what we have here works great. The inclusion of the characters makes it very clear what programme is upcoming, and the blend of the mysterious visuals and music really make you feel intrigued, excited, and ready for an episode of Ashes to Ashes. But if you want to hit that ballroom, then do we have the show for you.
Starring Kylie, the PM, and Gene Hunt. Well, almost. The Impression Show at 9:30. Now it's either BBC One or the BBC HD channel. He's at home with the flu, so with Brucey off his feet, look who's filling his shoes.
Glitter balls, not disco balls. There's a difference. On the surface, it's pretty self-explanatory as to what programme this is promoting, that being Strictly Come Dancing. This was seen during the 2009 series, and oddly, never again until 2016, when the colour of the balls was changed from silver to gold. Whilst there's something strangely satisfying about watching these spheres spin and glitter all over the place, All accompanied to a lovely piece of music that blends both the Strictly and BBC One themes, there is something very bare bones about the ident. It's one of those where there isn't a great deal going on, and beyond the initial few seconds of intrigue, what is there to keep me interested as a viewer? Why not pan across the dance floor, show us more key iconography that is associated with the programme, even a glimpse of the hosts? Something like that could have added so much detail to the sequence. The dawn of the 2010s, I feel, was the beginning of many special idents for channels generally getting a little lazier in their execution. We'll see if that theory holds up with our next sequence today, down on Albert Square. And so the square becomes the circle. This ident was devised to help celebrate EastEnders' 25th anniversary, which took place in 2010. We see numerous characters from the soap all stare in amazement at the centre of the square, which by the virtue of TV magic has now been transformed into a circle, namely so we can get a nice bird's eye view shot of the familiar set, for the BBC One logo to take centre stage. First off, like with the Glitterballs idents, I love how they've blended musical themes here. The BBC One motif can be heard clearly, but the EastEnders keys are easy to spot too. Now, I know this whole ident will mean a lot more to fans of the show, unlike myself. Beyond Phil Mitchell and Peggy, I have pretty much no idea who any of these characters are, so the impact that this would have is absolutely lost on me. As it stands, it's a charming, rather amusing tribute to the BBC's most popular soap opera, and to be honest, if they ever run out of plot ideas, turning Albert Square into Albert Circle could be a last-ditch effort. But we're going way back now, to prehistoric times, for Planet Dinosaur.
Saving nature's miracle babies from extinction at 6, and now though brought to life in high definition on BBC One HD, cutting-edge animation of epic proportions. Discover the lost world of Planet Dinosaur.
Dinosaurs are always cool, right? No wonder we've had several documentaries or recreations of them on television. This ident was specially created to promote Planet Dinosaur, a series that aired in the autumn of 2011. We see a Camptosaurus munching on some greenery before the camera reveals a larger beast, an Allosaurus. We quickly zoom in on its eye, where the BBC One logo is located, the eye as a whole acting as the circle for this sequence. It makes for quite an arresting final image, one that's quite surreal, seeing a well-known TV logo right in the eye of a giant CGI dinosaur. The whole vibe of the ident is actually quite eerie, emphasised in part by the fact that there is no music to accompany it. All you get are the sounds of nature, which add to a sense of something coming, which obviously eventually does in our Allosaurus. I do wish we had a few more shots before we zoom into the big dino's eye, maybe showing off some of the different beasts we'll see in the series or some of the locations that we'd find them in, but this wouldn't be the only nature-based special ident in the Circles era. Oh no, there was tons of them, and to show you what's next, we'll head on over to Africa.
Our wonderful world at its very best now on BBC One and in stunning high definition on BBC One HD. David Attenborough begins a breathtaking new series exploring the vast natural wonders of Africa.
Now on BBC One Scotland and in high definition on BBC One Scotland HD, the setting sun yields to a dazzling display of stars as David Attenborough brings us another sparkling portrait of Africa.
I think flamingos are my spirit animal. For the 6-part Africa documentary series that debuted in early 2013, we see 2 new original sequences appear on BBC One to promote the broadcast. The first one shows a bunch of flamingos, and when I say a bunch, I mean quite literally thousands of them. The final image is quite jaw-dropping actually, but I have to be honest, as much as I love flamingos, I do wish we had a bit more to view on them than just standing idly around. But we may be seeing more of these flamingos a little bit later. The second variant to promote Africa decides to give us a view of the vast landscapes that make up the continent. We see a setting sun disappear, the night sky coming wonderfully into the picture, and several stars shimmering spectacularly. While this is quite a beautiful vista, I'm not overly wowed necessarily by these sorts of idents. They're quite nice to look at, but for me at least, there's not too much for me to engage with after the first few seconds. Perhaps we'll find something a little more engaging on the frozen planet.
Now, 4 years in the making, and in visually stunning high definition on BBC One HD. In a brand new series, David Attenborough takes us on a journey to a world beyond imagination in Frozen Planet.
Nature never ceases to amaze. The vista chosen for this ident is rather beautiful. A sharp sun beaming down onto an Arctic terrain where we can see tons of penguins going about their day down below. The ident was devised to promote Frozen Planet, a documentary series fronted by the absolute legend that is Sir David Attenborough. The time-lapse effect really works for this sequence, as we see the sun rise and the penguins move about below. It paints this rather serene picture of what can be found on our world, even in the coldest regions. I just wish though that there were more variants, or that this one could be expanded upon. Whilst the visuals are gorgeous, getting a glimpse at different frozen landscapes and the creatures that inhabit them. I suppose less is more was the intention with this one, and it does work to a degree, but I think more definitely could have been worked in. But let's see if David's programs can strike a winner with special idents as we settle down for Planet Earth Live. Not bad, but are you seeing a pattern here? We start things off well, getting a great shot of the Earth from space before we zoom in, rotate and settle on a barren plain. We see a man standing atop a vehicle, observing the elephants in the distance. I'm guessing this is supposed to be David Attenborough, perhaps? Whilst the final vista is quite pleasing to the eye, I do find this one a little bit recyclable. I say that because in many ways, it's quite similar to Frozen Planet. A sun, be it rising or setting being the focus, and showcasing the land below. It makes sense cohesively, I guess, as these nature documentaries are all under similar umbrellas, but I was hoping for something a bit more unique and a bit more detailed. But I'm all for second chances, so let's see what new ident was made for Planet Earth 2.
We've made it through a rocky week. It's Liam Whitney's big day. EastEnders in an hour, then Citizen Khan. The brand new series starts at 8:30. But getting Friday night started here on BBC One, Ewan McGregor, Michael Ball and Alfie Boe. Ruffling feathers and putting on a real show this Sunday night. The launch of a landmark series and the legend behind it, Sir David Attenborough, is among the stars on the sofa right now, with some strong language here on BBC One.
Nice to see multiple variants for one programme. 3 different idents ran in circulation during Planet Earth 2's broadcast. The first of them, Mountains, is as straightforward as it gets. A static shot at a group of them, time-lapsed to show the passing days and nights. Does it look visually impressive? Yes. Does the effect wear off fast? In my case, sadly it's another yes. The second one features 2 ibexes, desert-dwelling goats traversing a rather rocky terrain. This one is just stressful more than anything else. With how little ground there is, you find yourself on edge that these 2 could tumble off the face of the rock at any moment. Thankfully, that doesn't happen. That'd be quite the thing to show as an ident on primetime BBC One. The third and final variant is without question my favourite. A flock of flamingos move through the water gracefully and effortlessly, all to the soundtrack of the Glitter Ball sequence, which at first seems like a rather odd choice, but when paired with these fabulous creatures' movement, it actually works quite well. I could just watch flamingos all day, honestly. Fascinating species. Perhaps we could have seen more of their activities as opposed to just watching them wade through the water, but amongst the 3 variants commissioned for Planet Earth 2, I'd rather they just have saved the money and used this one exclusively. To round off our look at nature, we've got one more original ident for Life Story. Fish are funny creatures, aren't they? I've always found the life found in the depths of the water to be fascinating to view and learn about, and in their natural environments such as this, witnessing what they can do is truly quite remarkable. To promote the David Attenborough-fronted Life Story series in 2014, the fish chosen to help promote it in ident form is the humble pufferfish. We see it dig its body into the ground, ultimately revealing that it's been making a pattern in the shape of a circle, in the hopes of attracting a mate, I guess. Whilst the final pattern is quite appeasing to the viewer's eye, the payoff doesn't really feel that worth it. Also, the music used is far too grandiose compared to the visuals we have on screen. It gives this big epics feeling sound, which is fine, but perhaps for an ident that visually embodies that epicness. This should be more calm and serene audio-wise to reflect what we're seeing. So whilst the blue tones of the water are great, and the pufferfish is amusing, though we never see it fully inflated, it's another ident for a nature programme that just sort of exists. Nothing terrible, but nothing remarkably special either. We've had our fill of nature now, I think, so how's about we go back into the studio for the voice?
One of today's contestants actually says what could go wrong. Cooking fish with pear, he's about to find out. MasterChef follows. First on BBC One, Bianca's told the police about Liam. Question is, how long before she regrets it?
Bit mixed on this one. This is obviously advertising a series of the talent show The Voice, which made its debut on the BBC back in the early 2010s. This original ident basically must have been shot during one of the recording days for the show, and we start by seeing our 4 judges, Danny O'Donoghue, Sir Tom Jones, Jessie J and will.i.am, whose chairs all spin around to gaze at the person on stage, which is us. The camera perspective flips to be looking out from the stage, the microphone front and centre. This is part of the sequence I like the most. The image of the mic in the middle is quite stunning, and also summarises the nerves one can have when about to perform in front of a group of judges, and a studio audience to boot. The stuff with the judges spinning is fine, as it's the central premise of the show, but it's nothing all too exciting, at least for me. Had they just focused on the mic from the start, with maybe the lights coming on and the judges revealed, that could have been more impactful. But I was never really a big fan of The Voice anyway, so how about we look at a rather special sequence from Children in Need.
Well, have you got your onesie on? We're going pyjamas with Blue Peter. Join the bids to break the world record for onesie wearing now as we settle into a night of Children in Need with a one-show special which contains some strobe lighting.
This feels like quintessential Children in Need, doesn't it? Children in Need is an annual telethon that has been running yearly since 1980. The main aim is to raise tons of money for children's charities and causes all around the world, with several celebrities and personalities taking part, often for free, to help the cause. In 2012, the theme seemed to be all around onesies, which were all the rage back in the early 2010s. In an attempt to break the world record for most onesies worn by a group of people, it only makes sense that that ambition worked its way into this special ident. Now, Children in Need had dabbled in special idents before, but these were mainly just some of the regular circle sequences, ever so slightly amended. This one, however, is completely original. We see a bunch of onesie-clad children passing a ball down a line before we reach the centre, where the camera cuts to a top-down view, the circle swirling round and the BBC One logo appearing. The primary thing I like about this sequence is the sense of fun, that effortless joy that can often be found during Children in Need, alongside the bouts of sadness when we see the horrors that some children have to face. The colour scheme here is also spot on, a bright assortment of several primary colours, exactly the kind of tones you'd want for an event such as this. My only major criticism is that the reveal of the top-down view could have had a better build-up. We see these children passing a ball around, but what for? Maybe some cameos from that year's celebrity lineup could have appeared? But in any case, as special idents go, this one does its job well, encouraging us all to get our onesies on and do our bit where we can to support those children most in need. And for the theme of onesies, we'll be touching on those again a little bit later. But 2012 wouldn't be the only year during the Circles era in which Children in Need would receive its own unique ident. They followed this one up in 2013 with Spots.
Thousands of you sent in your spots for Blue Peter's Get Spotted campaign, and here they are, as we begin a star-studded night of fundraising on BBC One with the one-show Children in Need special.
Glad they maintained the colourful look. As onesies had been the theme of Children in Need during 2012, for 2013 it seems they adopted a focus on spots, which are found on the eye bandage of the event's mascot, Pudsey Bear. Pudsey himself makes an appearance, knocking on our screens before a series of unique spots spawns from the centre, forming our central circle. I love the abundance of colourful spots throughout the ident. Again, when advertising or promoting programmes or events such as Children in Need, a bright colour palette goes such a long way. My main criticism, though, would be that I wish we had more of a closer and detailed look at the unique spots that are hidden behind the BBC One logo. Perhaps it would have been better to show the children who designed these spots holding them up for camera, thus including participants just like in last year's ident. Overall, though, this spotty sequence isn't bad at all. It follows the principle of the circle set more closely, but still containing those elements that imply it's part of Children in Need. And whilst we're on the topic of colourful, entertaining idents, how about we check in to the House of Fun.
So, lottery tickets at the ready for later, along with Who Dares Wins. Now on BBC One and brightening up the BBC HD channel too. We're still a good few steps from the Emerald City.
Oh boy, now this feels like a proper time capsule. The House of Fun ident was shown on Saturday nights during the spring of 2010 to promote the programme lineup on BBC One. 3 of the central programmes that made up the schedule at the time were Total Wipeout, Over the Rainbow, and Doctor Who. First off, doesn't this animation look lovely? It was created by Aardman Animations, and if you're familiar with their work, then the quality should come as no surprise. We see Graham Norton be chased into Television Centre by an irate Dalek. Note the 3 singers singing Under the Rainbow at the top of the old donut. Inside TV Centre, it turns out it is a real funhouse, with Richard Hammond gliding down a slide, him being the host of Total Wipeout at the time, represented further by the famous Big Red Balls. Hiding behind Charlotte Church, Graham is saved by the arrival of the 11th Doctor, played by Matt Smith. Another fun little note is if you look under the TARDIS, you'll see the hand, hat and feet of a certain wicked witch. Using his sonic screwdriver, the Doctor is able to defeat the Dalek by activating one of the boxing gloves in the wall, knocking it over and further diminishing any threat the creature's ever had. The final image, zoomed out to show TV Centre and the House of Fun within forming the circle for the logo, is just an absolute stunner. I love these sorts of light-hearted animated sequences, ones where you can feel a real sense of time, effort and detail has gone into creating it. Now, you'd expect that from Aardman, given their track record, but it just makes you wish that all the other sequences that feel subpar could have had emphasis like this. A wonderful way to round off our look at original special idents to promote specific programmes. I am aware there was some made for Series 3 of Torchwood, Children of Earth, but these are merely some of the regular idents from the Circles era, adapted to have Torchwood iconography and clips glitched in every now and then. Thought I'd touch on them briefly, but we'll move on now to some new idents that were made to celebrate the years.
So, Father Brown is back later at 2:15 trying to solve the mysterious death of an ex-soldier. Now on BBC One though, how appealing does this look right now?
Ooh, a very interesting blend. These ones are more unique in a way, as they feature the BBC One at the start of the ident instead of the end. The logo quickly disappears amidst a scene of circular pillars, which rise and fall, spiral and swirl around, before revealing the tagline for these sequences, Love 2013 and 2014 respectively. I like how we go from the uniformity of these red pillars to different shades of multiple colours, all of which spelling out the words in an eye-grabbing and rather abstract manner. For those with a keen eye, and I'm surprised I caught this out with my awful eyesight to be honest, you may notice that the font chosen for this new slogan echoes retro video games, specifically from the 8-bit era. The soundtracks to the two, both of them different, also contains little blips and bloops that again reflect that era of gaming. I'm not sure why this retro throwback inspiration was included for these special idents, but it's something different, particularly for the BBC. The Love branding didn't stick around past 2014, in fact, something rather different would take up 2015. However, before we take a look at that, let's take a look at one of the variants of these, Love Spring. Now this is glorious. The overall premise and shots are mostly the same, however there are some pretty big changes to the variant. When the pillars begin to appear, a wave of bright wonderful yellow shoots out, drowning out the normally typical BBC One red. As this happens, we can see flowers beginning to grow out of the ground, perhaps the most common thing to happen during springtime. We pan out to see the new slogan, Love Spring, and whilst the final image is super striking, being adorned in yellow, I do wish the whole text had been shades of green as opposed to a split. Keeping the word love in yellow blends it into the background far too much. If they'd have made it the same colour as the word spring or kept it in the typical BBC One red, either would have worked infinitely better. It is nice though, seeing something other than red dominate a picture like this, particularly in something from the Circles era. The circle itself is kept, with it occasionally shooting round in a wave of red, again a very visually striking feature. Ultimately, whilst Love 2013 and 14 have their charms, I think Love Spring has to be my favourite. It just pushes the boat out that little bit more, and in the end, it's better for it. But as I mentioned before, something completely different debuted on BBC One for 2015, so let's take a look at that one.
Spring has sprung for Vern and his woodland friends at 10:20 animated comedy Over the Hedge here on BBC One. First, Jerry Seinfeld and Renee Zellweger star in B-Movie.
Bored with being adults, three men decide it was much more fun at college. Stay up late with Will Ferrell in Old School at 2:20.
A cute little idea. Shame it didn't last. But stepping back a few years, remember how I said onesies would crop up again? Well, I wasn't fibbing.
Now to rejoin the funniest night of the year for comic relief, welcome to BBC Onesie, as we settle down in our onesies for a great night of comedy and fundraising, with some strong language possible.
This one just feels weird. Carrying the popular onesie trend through into 2013 for comic relief, not only would they feature in another special ident, but they would change the name of the channel entirely to BBC Onesie, which is cute in one respect, but oddly irritating in another. We see a bunch of people in various different onesies, dancing around and walking, or more like frantically scrambling, up a curved flight of stairs, which to be fair, serves as a great template for the circle. I have to say though, for whatever reason, I find this ident more awkward than anything else. I can't put my finger on it, but the dancing these guys do is questionable, and seeing them frantically scramble, which I guess is to showcase a sense of fun and carefreeness, just comes across as a little unsettling, given there's no added context. I'm glad the BBC Onesie thing didn't carry on much past this. I don't mind a good onesie, don't get me wrong, but in terms of ident presentation, once or twice is more than enough. Jumping back now to the sporting world, BBC One would happily contribute some original idents for some of the biggest events in the calendar, such as the Commonwealth Games in 2014.
Scotland takes centre stage now on BBC One. Sit back and enjoy a glorious show, the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games 2014. On your marks, get set, Glasgow.
Ah, lovely Glasgow. The Commonwealth Games are a sporting event held every 4 years, in a similar manner to the Olympics. For 2014, the host city was Glasgow in Scotland, and as we've seen earlier, BBC One is often more than happy to contribute a special ident for one of the UK regions, this one being shown nationwide. We are treated to an aerial view of the city as we head towards the night, panning over various venues that will play host to some of the Commonwealth Game events. The final shot focuses on one of the bigger buildings, the SSE Hydro, which conveniently happens to nicely form a great circle shape for the BBC One logo to occupy. The music is borrowed from the Capes ident, which again, is fine and works well enough, but I always find it a bit disappointing when not all of the special idents get their own special piece of music. Or hell, even stock or existing music for that matter. Just moving one soundtrack along to another sequence feels very uninspired, but I digress. The final image focusing on the SSE Hydro is really appeasing to the eye, but I feel this whole ident would have benefited from perhaps showing us more of the games themselves, or perhaps highlights from past ones. Whilst I'm sure many who were planning on tuning in were already going to, showing off a few exciting highlights wouldn't have necessarily been a bad thing. And to round off our special sporting idents, we move now to the Olympic Games for Rio 2016.
We go late in the build to our Through the Night coverage of the Olympics on BBC One. Back live to Rio 2016 and celebrations.
Not what I expected for the Olympics, to be quite honest. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, we see a CGI anteater pick up a hammer and begin to spin, as if he's competing in the hammer throw event. And he spins, and spins, and spins. Now, granted, it's neat that it forms the basis for the central circle, but by God does this make me dizzy. There's no kind of payoff, the anteater is just left to endlessly spin, but I tell you what, if he ever did let that thing go, he'd definitely end up winning the gold medal easily. I don't have much else to say on this one, what I described is literally all there is. And what a shame in promoting an event such as the Olympics. Whether you feature footage from the games or not, something more engaging surely would have been the more appealing option when broadcasting the biggest sporting event on Earth. It surprises me as well that for the other 2 Olympic Games held within the Circles era, more traditional circle idents weren't used. For Beijing 2008, special animations were used to introduce programming, but seemed to lack any semblance of the Circles concept or the BBC One logo. Perhaps more surprising is the case for the 2012 Games, which were held in London. Now, there were some special idents created, but not necessarily under the Circles template. The BBC HD channel would broadcast highlights from each of the games in 3D, and yeah, this was the era where the industry was trying to make 3D in television a big deal, and suffice to say, it didn't happen. These sequences are impressive, but they lack the circle template, and I wouldn't be able to show them off properly with the 3D effect, so they won't be covered here. There were some other sequences that heralded the BBC as the Olympic broadcaster, but again, I'd argue that these are more promos than idents, as they lack the circles theming. But as the final part of our mega review today, let's get festive and take a look at the Christmas idents of the Circles era, and we'll start with the first one that debuted during the December of 2006. Now, doesn't this just put you in the mood? Christmas idents have been a long tradition on BBC One, harking all the way back to the late 1960s, and with every new ident refresh, a brand new sequence to mark the festive season hits our screens every single year. Well, almost every year. For 2006, the first year of the Circles, they've kept the concept simple, but featuring all the key bits of Christmas. Various residents are seen rolling about snowballs of different sizes, seeing them build and grow giant, the biggest snowball forming the festive circle in the final image. The key iconography of Christmas is such a big part of making an ident to meet the mood of the season. By featuring a snowball as your central concept, you meet that aim almost instantly. I love how it also represents a time of coming together, how making snowballs is never just for children, the grown-ups can get involved too. Everyone can join in to make something magical, which is the result we have here. This ident was seen during Christmas 2007 as well, but alongside a new original sequence, featuring penguins.
Now a double bill of fantastic films for Christmas afternoon here on BBC One. Go green with Shrek 2 at 20 to 5. But first, discover a whole new world beneath the waves in the network premiere of Finding Nemo.
Well, this takes me right back to that Christmas morning. The big day of 2007 I remember so well. The gifts I got, the things I watched on the telly, most of which was on BBC One. Our setting this time takes us out of the screens and onto the ice rink. One of my favourite places. But within all of the humans going for a skate, we have tons and tons of penguins who want to join in with the fun. And they don't need skates, they can slide on their bellies. But they do seem partial to a bit of ballet and an ice cold drink. Whether they can get it out though, that's another story. The final shot focuses on the centre of the rink, which has a Christmas tree made up of big red baubles as the focal point. This really is just all the best elements of Christmas coming together. Ice skating, a lovely tree, penguins, whilst not necessarily associated with the season, are creatures of the cold, so it makes sense. Plus, who doesn't love penguins, even CGI ones, getting up to all sorts of shenanigans? This ident proved so popular that a few months later in 2008, it was reintroduced as a regular sequence, albeit with any ties to Christmas, like the tree, removed. And whilst this does take away some of the magic from the original, it's always nice to see such a positive, playful and joyful ident have some sort of life beyond a certain time of year. And another thing that people love is the dynamic duo of Wallace and Gromit.
We're on BBC One. Hey, who turned out the lights? Gromit, where's me hat?
These two at Christmas? Perfect. This wasn't the first time Wallace and Gromit had been the central focus of a festive sequence, nor is it the first time we've discussed them. We've actually dedicated a whole episode of the Ident Review to Wallace and Gromit back in the day, so if you fancy seeing some more, check that video out. To briefly give my thoughts on this one again, it's just charm to a T. After Wallace fails to keep a grip on his sled, Gromit takes over, performing successful tricks and loops like he's Tony Hawk. This was created to help promote the then brand new Wallace and Gromit short, A Matter of Loaf and Death, which ultimately became one of the most viewed programmes of 2008. Whilst I'm sure many were aware and were going to tune in, I'd like to think this special ident helped somewhat, in not only making people feel Christmassy, but in getting them excited to say hello to these wonderful characters once again. But how do you top Wallace and Gromit? Well, for Christmas 2009, BBC One would employ the services of arguably their most famous character. This is peak, and you know it is. Doctor Who was arguably at the peak of its revived popularity back in 2009, with David Tennant leading the charge as the 10th Doctor. With his final story due to be transmitted on Christmas Day and on New Year's Day 2010, it only seemed right that BBC One incorporated their most popular programme into their festive tradition. Again, I have covered this sequence before in a previous episode of the Ident Review, but like with Wallace and Gromit, I'll summarise here. The Doctor employs the help of a herd of reindeer to free the TARDIS from the snow, taking off into the sky and perfectly forming the circle against a gorgeously lit sky. It's a truly beautiful final image to rest on, and the inclusion of the Doctor and the TARDIS make it all the more fun. My only minor nitpick would be that whilst the music used sounds great, it would have been even better if some Doctor Who tunes could have been incorporated as well. Even just adapting the theme to the BBC One motif would have been a wonderful touch. I may be slightly biased as a Doctor Who fan, but come on, at Christmas time, it really doesn't get much better than this. So as the world entered a new decade, how would BBC One set the scene for 2010?
It's a sparkling Saturday night on BBC One with some especially sharp dance moves in high definition on BBC One HD.
A return to form, but a good one. After using characters, we return to a more traditional form of Christmas presentation, focusing on key iconography as well as a sense of coming together. We see some humorous examples of what can happen this time of year, frozen cars, nearly slipping on ice, but also the positives such as heading over the families for Christmas and also the use of Christmas lights. As the houses in this cul-de-sac all begin to illuminate, we head to an aerial shot, the houses nicely making up the circle for the sequence. An added little touch that I quite like is that the BBC One is illuminated as well, which really helps it blend in and feel like a proper part of the overall piece. The lights on the houses are predominantly red too, which not only is the main colour for BBC One, but conveniently happens to be one of the key colours associated with Christmas. The music for this works nicely too, being jolly and upbeat, with little sound effects here and there that instantly give it away as some kind of Christmas tune. So even though it's not tied into the big Christmas programme of that year, I like that when returning to something a bit more traditional, BBC One still went the extra mile to give us something heartwarming, eye-catching, and engaging to view during December. But for the following year, in 2011, things became a little more musical.
Consider yourself at home.
Consider yourself one of the family. We've taken to you so strong. It's clear we're going to get along. Consider yourself well in. Consider yourself part of the furniture. There isn't a lot to spare. Who cares? Whatever we got, we share. Consider yourself well in. Consider yourself part of the furniture. There isn't a lot to spare. Who cares? Whatever we got, we share. Some consideration we can stay. Consider yourself.
Make yourself right at home with BBC One this Christmas. Now, as the team fight to save their own lives, drama to take your breath away in Casualty.
Well, talk about extravagant. The first showing of this ident stands as one of the longest of any Christmas, at well over a minute, We see the various stars of the BBC come together to give us a rendition of Consider Yourself, originally from the musical Oliver. Now, not only can you spend this sequence playing Who's Who of stars on BBC One, but its charm once again comes from the sense of fun, family and togetherness during Christmas time. Whether that's playing games, singing songs, eating sweets and chocolate, all of those and more are seen as quintessential parts of the holiday season. And in a world of drastically increasing competition on television, BBC One more than ever wants you to become part of the family. The final image of the stars surrounded by a circle of carol singers is quite a nice finale, but it's sadly blurred out as the BBC One logo comes in and snowflakes fall around it. Some may like it, but I find the blur just totally ruins the image completely, dampening the impact as a whole. There were of course shorter versions of the ident, with the final shot being of the dinner table, adorned with everything Christmassy you could want. This is definitely a much better shot to end on, though I get that it doesn't summarise the build-up with the song. Ultimately though, not a bad way to bring your stars together. But there was also one extra variant that preceded a special programme for children.
Trapped in a burning hospital. They're preparing for the worst on Casualty in 45 minutes. Before that on BBC One, a little earlier than billed, plans for a takeover of Camelot.
Can't beat a bit of the Gruffalo. Based on the book by Julia Donaldson, the Gruffalo's child was animated just as the original story was, both now becoming staples for children's Christmas TV viewing. We see father and child sliding down the snow, having the time of their lives, soaring through the air before crashing through a pile of snow, leaving a nice round circle behind for the BBC One logo to inhabit. It's fun and puts a smile on your face for sure, again invoking that sense of joy around the holiday season. It's a cute touch to see the Gruffalo and their child embracing next to the logo too, a reminder to keep our loved ones close and share our gratitude for them every year. It still uses the Consider Yourself instrumental, which I suppose makes sense as it was the main theme for the year, but why not take some music from the animation? Again, the recycling of soundtracks isn't always to my taste, but the instrumental is joyous enough that it still works here to some extent. For next year's Christmas, 2012 had been quite the year for the UK, so BBC One was more than ready for showtime.
What a spectacular year it's been for sport, and now on BBC One, the eagerly awaited celebration of its stars.
I predict a riot of festive laughter now on BBC One and BBC One HD, with some strong language and adult humour. Mammy has got planned the mother of all nativity plays.
Talk about a basic approach. With the theme being showtime, having a traditional red theatre curtain drop down and form your background does work a treat. However, beyond that, we are treated to various gold sparkles, taking various forms such as a Christmas tree, snowflakes and even fireworks. Whilst these features are recognisably Christmassy, I can't help but feel that these are very lacklustre for festive idents, especially when compared to what else we've had in the CIRLCES era. There were some other variants that popped up, featuring animated characters whose movies were showing on BBC One that year. These include Shrek, Prince Naveen and Russell from Up. They're sweet enough, but beyond a few slices of animation, there's nothing much else to say on them. The background and general framing remains exactly the same, but if you're disheartened at this like I am, don't you worry, for our friends in Northern Ireland cooked up something special for us this year.
Mordred's forced to make a choice and aware of the consequences on Camelot, Merlin at 8:15. And for Saturday night now on BBC One Northern Ireland, a super sparkly semi-final of Strictly.
Now that's what I call Christmas. It's not much when you break it all down, but I'd argue that this Northern Ireland exclusive does far more in getting you into the Christmas spirit than any of the variants seen on the rest of BBC One during 2012. We see people playing in the snow, building snowmen before settling on a glittery red bauble. It's one of the most essential and iconic slices of Christmas, which makes it ripe for the picking to be represented by a festive ident. It doesn't do anything to necessarily break new ground or knock your socks off, but it at the very least looks and feels like Christmas, far more than the showtime sequence. So if 2012 came across a little disappointing, we all hope that 2013 would be a wonderful Christmas indeed.
Well, we all knew Tom could sing, but Hugh playing the piano, now that's a gift. The decorations are up on BBC One, so we can officially say we're merrily on the way to the prospect of having a wonderful Christmas. The series finale of The Paradise is tomorrow night at 8 on BBC One. Will it be happy ever after for Moray and Denise? We're all the richer for having Chris Evans here with the National Lottery live in 50 minutes. First, Fletch is in the doghouse, and he's not alone.
Seasonal inspiration from James Martyn's Christmas Kitchen in 45 minutes. Then Flog It celebrates Agatha Christie at 4:30. But now on BBC One, Aled Jones follows in Roman footsteps.
Sparkle at 5 after our big Christmas afternoon film, and it's a cracker. This is the highest grossing animated movie ever. On BBC One, the premiere of Toy Story 3.
Traditional and yet modern. When I say traditional, I mean that the design choice BBC One has gone for is wrapping paper. We see ribbons somewhere on the screen during each of them, and several variants did arrive this year, all with a different pattern. We have robins who come alive to sing and doff their top hats at you, golden angels sat by a tree, some placing the star on top whilst others gaze idly on. We have a set of reindeers, some doing their own thing solo, whilst the two at the top meet and share a nose touch, I guess? We have snowflakes also, though I'd rather the one at the start in the middle of the screen stick around rather than disappear into the BBC One logo, the others not really making much of an impact at all. A fifth variant later appeared, replacing robins with various Toy Story characters in little golden dots. This was due to the fact that BBC One was showing the trilogy of Toy Story films over Christmas, with Toy Story 3 receiving its network TV premiere on Christmas Day 2013. Whilst these wrapping paper idents have some charm to them, like with 2012, it feels a little lackluster compared to many of the festive sequences we've seen. Whether it was the character-driven ones of 2008 and 9, or the more simplistic ones from the early days of the Circles era, they all felt very Christmassy at their core, and whilst these do evoke the imagery of Christmas, there's little excitement holding me here as a viewer. As we head into 2014, we can only hope this very lackluster approach didn't go for a hat-trick. Thankfully, they came up with something better. Magical. Quite magical. Done away with are the red backgrounds of show curtains and wrapping paper, swapped in for the most important piece of festive iconography, Christmas trees. In a snow-laden forest, we see various people decorating some rather special trees, as 3 different variants were produced, aiming at highlighting some of that year's biggest programming on BBC One. There's one for the Great British Bake Off, when it still aired on the BBC, where we see some bakers putting the finishing touches on what looks like a rather tasty tree. Another highlight, Strictly Come Dancing. This tree is made up of shiny glitter balls, with a red one on top acting as the star, with a fairy dancer to boot. But my favourite, unsurprisingly, is the TARDIS blue coloured tree, adorned with lights and police boxes, and mysteriously dematerialises away, with a person wearing a rather familiar scarf nearby. All variants finish on this lovely cluster of trees, which act as a pseudo-circle, and even though this takes place in the evening, the bright lights of the various trees puts that warm fuzzy feeling right into you. The soundtrack as well is a gorgeous rendition of To Love Somebody, a classic song originally written and released by the Bee Gees way before their disco days. All in all, these serve as truly wonderful Christmas idents. They have all the hallmarks of the season, and they do BBC One proud. Definitely one of the best of the 2010s, that's for sure. For the following year in 2015, we'd see a return to a story-based ident for Christmas. The story of Sprout Boy.
Welcome to Christmas and welcome to Little Sprout Boy on BBC One. The lights are on. We're all about giving and there's a lot to love this Christmas. Here's a taster of things to come. We're feeling really festive now on BBC One. Lots of exciting things to look forward to and plenty of sparkle now we've officially switched on to Christmas. But not everyone's in high spirits in EastEnders. So the sinister campaign against the residents intensifies and Smitty reveals a big secret tonight. Pure drama with Capital in an hour on BBC One. after Holby City.
I'll confess, I'm no fan of Sprouts. However, I am a fan of Sprout Boy. This character would be the star of Christmas on BBC One this year, with a lavish 1 minute long promo showcasing how he isn't the most well loved of Christmas vegetables. The promo is voiced by 12th Doctor Peter Capaldi, who together with a bunch of BBC stars invites Sprout Boy to celebrate Christmas with them, honing in that sense of acceptance or togetherness once more during the festive period. The idents themselves feature Sprout Boy doing a variety of Christmassy things. One example is writing labels for Christmas gifts, which if you look closely, you'll see that Sprout Boy is writing to none other than the Doctor. However, in doing so, he loses his balance and falls on a ribbon bow, which duly sticks to his back, forming the basis of the circle and BBC One logo, in blazing red, of course. Another example sees the vegetable having a go at a Christmas cracker, and despite not winning, a trinket ring falls onto his head, perfectly fitting him and acting more as a crown than anything else. Very cute. The third variant sees Sprout Boy at the head of the dining table, joined by the CGI-rendered BBC stars from the full promo. These include Claudia and Tess from Strictly, will.i.am from The Voice, Doc Cotton from EastEnders, Sherlock and Watson, Luther, Mary Berry from Bake Off, and Graham Norton, now with beard. Not only is it great to see these stars in animated form, but it just sums up the joy behind the Sprout Boy story. Despite all of the struggles and adversities he may have faced, he ultimately was able to find somewhere, a family of his own, to celebrate Christmas. There were a few more idents that popped up this year, though they don't feature Sprout Boy as the central focus. One is a beautiful nightscape adorned with lanterns, which as an image I definitely wouldn't mind framing up on my wall. The other is a city view, again taken from the winter months, but this variant only aired in Northern Ireland. So for Christmas 2016, how on earth would you top Sprout Boy?
Wait till you see what I've got for you. Look at that. That's not bad, is it? Ready? Wait for it, wait for it. Boom! Illuminations! Not bad, is it?
Settling in for Sunday night drama and a family get-together that's not without friction here on BBC One, a glamorous visitor to Moy Beg stirs up passions. My Mother and Unges.
On this fourth Sunday in Advent, Songs of Praise as festive favourites you can sing along with at 4:40. But first here on BBC One Northern Ireland, a feast of movie and show tunes for you as we look back on Proms in the Park 2016.
At 10 o'clock, the news here on BBC One with Michelle Hussein.
A simple, yet satisfying finale. Rather than story or character-driven idents, we're back to featuring several variants, all showing some kind of key Christmassy object. It's a tried and trusted method at this point, but it's relatable enough and works well. We see someone showing off their brand new Christmas jumper, and gaudy as it is, it does light up, which is pretty nifty. But beyond serving as the circle for the BBC One logo, I wouldn't be wearing that jumper much. Another variant shows us in a family home, that point on Christmas Day where everyone has had dinner, watching TV, but some members of the family are so knackered that they just fall asleep on the sofa, party hat and all. If you look on the telly, even though it's out of focus, you can definitely tell this family are watching BBC One. And as humorous as it is that this poor geezer's head is the focal point for an ident, at least that vibe of falling asleep on the big day is entirely relatable. Rewinding back to Christmas dinner, our third variant this year has a Christmas pudding as the basis for the circle, with family members eagerly watching on, hoping that those matches will eventually light up. It's probably my least favourite from this year, but it feels Christmassy, and again, is entirely relatable to many kinds of audiences. The final regular variant to be broadcast for Christmas 2016 is short and sweet, focusing on a red bauble on a Christmas tree, similar to what BBC One Northern Ireland did a few years back. It summarises the vibe and energy I get from these sequences, simple, yet to the point. It's Christmas time, and what better way to encompass that spirit and promise by showing relatable moments from the holidays. On Christmas Day itself, new idents were shown before many of the day's biggest programmes, all of which showing different groups of people introducing said different shows. There are several of these, but to show an example, here's one promoting Doctor Who, featuring friend of the channel, Dominic G. Martyn.
It's Doctor Who, now on BBC One.
A nice idea to introduce the different shows, but notice that word in the middle? Oneness? Oh no. It's started. But before that new era fully kicks in, it's time to round up the Circles era once and for all. For any ident set to last a few years as a channel's central form of presentation is achievement enough. For a set to last for over a decade, now that shows that they held something truly special. When they first came about in late 2006, many appreciated the simple, yet often very engaging concepts that hit their TV screens in those first few months. The circle motif itself arguably represented both a callback and evolution of the globe idents of old, having a central and consistent focus point to every ident that came about in this era. As the years went on and more idents cropped up, both for regular broadcast and for special occasions, the circle's concept found room to expand and evolve too. The more simple structures often remained, but the designers found many new ways to promote either specific programs, create a certain mood or atmosphere, or just find a way to engage viewers and entice them into whatever BBC One had on offer. For millions of viewers, the circles are instantly recognisable, and even to this day, coming close to a decade since they were withdrawn, many still see them as the de facto BBC One look. As 2017 rolled in, the hippos swam away, to allow a brand new era in BBC One presentation to take the reins. And the tagline for it was, oneness. Oh boy, do I have stuff to say about this set, but we'll leave that for another time. And so, we bid farewell to the Circle's idents. For 10 years they kept us entertained, engaged and enthralled to BBC One. Whilst not every sequence was a home run, plenty of them have gone on to be fondly remembered and recalled, and probably will be for several years and decades to come. Cheers to the Circles, their impact for BBC One presentation, and their lasting legacy in the wide world of television idents. Thank you all so much for watching this special episode of the Ident Review. I can't believe this show has reached its 5th anniversary. From its humble beginnings to all the channels and sequences we've looked at over the years, I'm forever humbled for your support, your kindness, and your enthusiasm for these little pieces of TV history. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like the video, subscribe to us here at AMTV, and let me know your thoughts on the idents we've looked at today in the comments down below. I've been Martyn from AMTV, and until the next time, see you later.